But isn't it a fact that heavy metals and some carcinogens are in coal ash?
Yes, and they're also in soil and naturally occurring.
North Carolina is one of the biggest tobacco manufacturers in the country. Isn't it interesting that our Attorney General is now suing the largest competitor of that industry? You can believe that this is truly, genuinely the best thing to do, the best thing for the state, the best thing for the public purse. But if hospitals don't sign on and there are thousands of people who have to drive 2 hours to get care that's in their network, what do you say to those folks?
We're fully committed to having a network where that is not going to be necessary.
How are we going to make that happen in a few days?
It's gut-wrenching. Union County, 729 kids waiting. Gaston, 607. Rowan, 876. Mecklenburg, 2,611. Parents sending their kids back to school, do you think they should be concerned about this?
Very concerned.
Is he okay?
Yes, he's fine.
Okay.
They give him a quick tourniquet with the belt.
There was no one else in there, right? That you know of?
Savannah, this is such a heartbreaking case.
It's horrific, really. I mean, Sheriff Brooks just told me that this 19-year-old mother admitted under questioning that she made this whole abduction story up. Take a live look right now at the scene. You can see it's kind of taped off, but the home down that dirt road right there. Here's what happened. It started about 2 hours ago. The mom called deputies, said she was checking the mail, holding her 11-month-old baby daughter, and said a strange man ran up and punched her in the face, snatched her baby, and drove off. So an Amber Alert was issued. But Sheriff Brooks told me he felt things were a little fishy. For example, she kept talking about the bruises this alleged abductor left on her face, but deputies figured out those bruises actually happened when she was in a car accident last week. So Sheriff Brooks told me he went with that hunch. He had deputies sweep the area around the home. That's when two deputies, both parents, found that baby girl's body in a diaper box that was tossed into the brush about 1,000 yards from the home.
But lawmakers in South Carolina say the moment a driver gets behind the wheel of a car, they shouldn't even be able to touch an electronic device. He was watching the footage from his home surveillance camera when he noticed something or some things.
All right, and guys, we've been talking about these storm surges. Here's what that means. Where I'm standing right now is going to be essentially underwater this time tomorrow.
You know, I've been here all week, and all week the air outside of the park here has been bustling with urgency and buzzing with hope, but now it's just kind of deafeningly quiet.
I also just got confirmation from the FBI that they will be leading this investigation moving forward. Of course, sexual assault is a crime anywhere, but the fact that it happened on a flight makes this a federal case. Certainly a very big deal.
You assume the label of a product tells you exactly what's inside, right? Well, we sent popular CBD oils off to a lab to be tested, and turns out what's inside what you're ingesting is actually kind of a roll of the dice.
You can hear, I mean, there's moments where they're very tense and quiet, and then that happens. This is a nail biter of a game. I just got a head count, 9,000 fans in the dome right now.
As those shots rang out, and we do have video that we're about to show you. Before we do, I want to let you know it's very disturbing. It's hard to listen to. You can hear the gunshots. You can hear students screaming. The reason we want to show it is because it's sometimes easy to disassociate yourself from things like that. Since we're in North Carolina, this is in Florida, but we feel it's important to really bring home just how uniquely horrific this situation was.
Feel free to add in the comments any questions that you have. We'll be able to see them in real time here and answer them. Before that, though, I want to play the story that aired last night so that if you haven't seen it yet, you get a little bit of context for this conversation we're about to have. So, James, are we able to play that? All right, here you go.
The PIO, the Public Information Officer for Wrightsville Beach, got up there during a press conference today and said, look, you guys are putting our first responders at risk by being out there. Sorry. So he went through with the charges and cited that as the reason. I thought that was interesting. But the reaction to this storm in particular, I think in large part really does have to do with the impacts that this area got from Florence. But also, you know, I think a pretty good respect for the law enforcement agencies here when they have been saying for the past several days, look, get out, don't put yourselves in danger.
Welcome to Unbroken, the podcast. I'm Savannah Levins.
NBC Charlotte defender Savannah Levins has been investigating these cancer clusters for years. Tonight, in an NBC Charlotte exclusive, she brings us a plea from two towns. The search for what's causing cancer in Huntersville and Mooresville.
And there's one of my favorite pictures of all time, but Keenan and me on her wedding day. I still remember the day she called me when she said, "Dad, they found a tumor on my eye."
Keenan Colbert was 23 when she was diagnosed with ocular melanoma, a rare cancer that on average affects 5 in every 1 million people. She was 28 when the incurable cancer took her life. After Keenan's death, her parents discovered several other young women who lived nearby were diagnosed with ocular melanoma too.
And the next thing you knew, we were up to maybe 8 or 10 or 12.
And yet no money from the state to investigate.
People got scared and people got mad because, people said, this could be my kid.
Eventually, state legislators passed a bill allocating $100,000 to investigate. That was April 2017. Since then, the number of confirmed cases has doubled. Last month, the grant money ran out. The results of the investigation were shared with a packed room. 2 years of geospatial research, genetic testing, and soil testing turned up nothing. The potential total now, 30 people in this town of 50,000 who have one of the world's rarest cancers.
We can't say that there's, it's inconclusive and then say there's 4 more cases. Well, there's something there.
Rob Kidwell, multi-term commissioner for the town of Huntersville, says after 2 years, they have no answers and no more money.
And right now, there's no new testing scheduled.
No.
But that isn't the end of this story, because just down the road in the neighboring town of Mooresville, another mystery is unfolding. Back now to 2017, when 16-year-old Taylor Wind was diagnosed with thyroid cancer.
Immediately, that's where people started contacting me. Neighbors on my street came to me and they were like, we had thyroid cancer.
And she started wondering if maybe this wasn't all just a coincidence.
I asked our doctor, is this normal that there's 3 thyroids cut out on my street? And she said, that doesn't sound right.
Susan raised over $100,000 to pay independent researchers at Duke University to investigate. Those researchers used state data to determine that in Mooresville, thyroid cancer rates are about 2 to 3 times higher than average. Here, right down the road from an inexplicable cancer cluster, was another one.
I mean, when you start, walking down your neighborhood and you're like, they have cancer, there's just no way.
It's on my street alone, there's 3 of us. And I think until it happens to you directly, it's really easy to ignore.
Mooresville Mayor Mile Atkins is frustrated.
Nobody else is doing any kind of a study. A private citizen has to raise $100,000 to go figure out what got her daughter sick.
The Duke University researchers, still using the grant money raised by Susan, identified and interviewed patients, tested their environments, their genetics. They tested the town's water. They tested schools for radon. Nothing. And then all eyes locked on the elephant on the lake. Duke Energy's Marshall Steam Station and the 17 million tons of coal ash sitting there in an unlined basin.
The natural instinct would be the correlation between what we have, all this coal ash, it can be toxic, and then does that have some correlation to these cancers?
Duke Energy spokesperson Paige Sheehan agreed to sit down with me to answer our questions.
Is coal ash toxic?
No. If I had a bottle of water here and I were to drink a bottle of water, that water is perfectly safe for me. If I were to drink 50 of them while I'm sitting here, that water would be toxic because it's the dose and the exposure that makes it toxic. I can't imagine what these parents are going through. But that's why it's important for us to acknowledge that emotion. And then we have to ask that there be room in the discussion for the facts.
But let's go back a few decades before coal ash and its potential health concerns made headlines. Records we uncovered from the DEQ show coal ash from the plant was once sold as construction material. People could pick it up by the truckload and bring it home.
As our community was booming, there was an interest in using coal ash as a structural fill.
It's not done anymore, but records show the ash was integral to the construction and housing booms in both Mooresville and Huntersville.
Folks who were building homes and gardeners sometimes, that they could go up and grab a truck full of coal ash for smaller uses. Those were not documented.
State Senator Vicki Sawyer has publicly opposed the use of coal ash for construction, but she's hesitant to say that's what's causing the cancer.
I was very convinced that, the coal ash is, contaminating all of Mooresville. It's easy to make that assumption, but you cannot prove it.
Although coal ash contains toxic substances like arsenic, lead, and mercury, there's been no research directly linking coal ash to thyroid cancer or ocular melanoma. But people who live here, people who are getting sick, argue there haven't been any studies that officially rule it out either.
Until the state proves that there is no way that this could be linked, could have caused anyone's illnesses in that town. Until they can prove this, I'm not going to take the utility company's word for it.
And many believe the fact that there are 2 apparent cancer clusters in our great state in neighboring towns is something that just can't be ignored.
I think we'd be short-sighted not to look that there isn't a connection.
If you're still wondering whether this is all just a coincidence,
I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer in 2010.
consider Steve Durant.
And then in 2017, I was diagnosed with ocular melanoma.
While living smack in the middle of the clusters.
To have 2 clusters within a 3-town radius should be very alarming for a lot of people.
It just really honestly boils down to money.
But so far, state legislators have not approved a penny more.
Managing expectations of how government works is the worst message that I have to send.
For now, here's a plea from 2 towns. Care. Care that your neighbors are dying. Care that they don't know why. Care that it could be you or your friend or your child.
Hopefully another mom or dad will wake up one day and say, I need to do something.
Savannah Levins, NBC Charlotte.
Defenders exclusive. Environmental activist Erin Brockovich responding to our Defenders investigation into reported cancer clusters in Huntersville and Mooresville.
You have to keep going. You've uncovered enough now. Not stop.
Having to lie, I feel, is the saddest and the ugliest part of being a homosexual. You can't go to your brother or your sister and say, I'm hurting.
Based on the way that homosexuality was addressed from the pulpit, I believe that though everyone was broken, I was a little more broken than everybody else because my particular sin was an abomination.
Joshua Crocker says he didn't want to be gay.
It was something that I had to overcome, had to get rid of, had to fix. I wanted a solution.
After 2 decades hiding his secret, he began meeting with a conversion counselor based in Greenville, South Carolina.
I believe that that was something that I might be able to experience victory over if I prayed hard enough, believed hard enough, studied the right things.
Conversion or reparative therapy, the idea that homosexuality can be fixed, has been around since the late 1800s when cures included lobotomy and castration. Today, it more often manifests in the form of faith-based camps or counseling sessions.
Those conversations with that counselor just kind of it reinforced that idea that I'm inherently gross.
Recently, the effectiveness of conversion therapy has been widely discredited and criticized. Some studies have directly linked it to suicide.
I remember driving back to my apartment, just weeping and yelling and being so angry and frustrated and sad. And I remember yelling at God while I was in my car going down the highway and just asking him why he hadn't fixed me yet. And I started thinking through where I could crash my vehicle and what bridges would be easiest to run off of and how I could do it in a way that make sure I don't make it.
We don't have to act on our feelings, and that's the message of our ministry.
Malia Allard is the executive director of New Beginning Support Ministry and a network of so-called ex-gay counselors that spans the Carolinas.
We're here for people who have faith and they have unwanted same-sex attractions or unwanted gender identity disorder.
Our message is about freedom from homosexuality through Jesus Christ.
Malia prefers to see her work as faith-based counseling for people struggling with their sexual identity rather than, quote, conversion therapy.
Do you think anyone can change that if they try hard enough?
Do I believe you can pray the gay away?
We're going to turn you all straight because you're all gay kids, and that's a problem, okay?
I believe if a person is motivated and they're willing to surrender to their Savior and trust Him, I believe He's capable of changing it.
That belief, she says, comes from firsthand experience.
I had lived as a lesbian woman from the time that I was 18 until I was about 28, but I made a choice to not act on those attractions anymore.
She says that's what her ministry is helping others accomplish.
Could you kind of talk to people who think that the church hates gay people?
If people are gay and they're happy, our ministries are not there for them. More power to you. We're happy for you that you're happy.
15 states and D.C. have some law against conversion counseling, particularly when it relates to minors. But in both Carolinas, parents can legally enroll their children in these camps and programs.
Parents will drag their teenagers into my office, and their goal is typically for me to fix them. The kid has to convince me they want to be there. They can't be being manipulated or coerced.
Human rights groups say there are still some active conversion organizations that use physical and emotional abuse in their camps and their sessions.
I'm not negating the fact that there have been some people practicing those methods that have behaved in ways that were wrong, but my ministry doesn't.
For some who have gone through it, like Joshua,
it was rough. It was rough.
The therapy was not a saving grace. It was agony.
If you could go back and talk to that 20-something-year-old guy who was driving down the road crying, begging to be fixed, what would you say?
I would tell him he's not broken and that nothing good grows in the darkness. Nothing good grows in the darkness.
Glory, glory, hallelujah.
I am learning to be a full person for the first time in my life.
My life is totally transformed.
Glory, glory, hallelujah.
I really love myself, probably for the first time ever.
And now, finally, I like myself for the first time in my life.
I mean, it really finally comes down to finding one other person to love and be loved by, and you serve each other's needs.
It is true,